Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about food, food waste, and happiness. My talk has three parts. The first part, I want to talk about the massive food loss and food waste problem we have in Hong Kong and, in fact, in the world. Then I want to share with you that actually this is one problem that you and I have a high degree of control. And then lastly, I want to share some ideas with you about how I see that maybe we can develop a new food culture. Well, before I start, I want to introduce you to my favorite icon in Hong Kong, 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏. I'll tell you something about 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏 in a moment. Well, let's start by talking about how massive the problem is. Hong Kong is only one city in the world, but we throw away 3,600 tons of food waste a day. I think you know that actually it's not just the 3,600 tons. There are a lot of other resources that go into making the food. Thirdly is actually there's also all kinds of indirect waste because the food has to be stored, it has to be transported, and it has to be packaged. So there is a picture here of the plastic and the paper that is used to pack food. And then lastly, I think you and I also know that food waste is also a climate change problem. As you can see here, food waste alone causes 10% of the world greenhouse gases. I want to also take a look at China's national picture. Estimates show that 6% of China's food production is lost before it reaches the consumer. This is a huge amount of food. Also, food waste itself, 17 to 18 million tons of food waste is thrown away. And research in China shows that the biggest wasters are tourists. Maybe when we are visiting someplace, we like to go out and eat, and maybe we're really more wasteful. Also students, because students sometimes can be very choosy in whether they eat something or not. And then, of course, you and I both know banquets. We tend to over-order. And if you look at the box here, in China, these are the statistics that are really quite frightening. We throw away 30%, nearly 30% of our vegetables, 19% of our meats, and 24% of rice and noodles. Well, the good news is this doesn't have to go on like that because you and I have a lot of control. Perhaps like most people in the cities, we eat 2 or 3 times a day. I eat twice a day. On each occasion, we can choose how to cook, not to waste, what to order, what not to over-order. And if you're running a food business, well, surely it's to your advantage not to waste food. And then if you're an investor in some kind of a food business, surely you want not to generate food waste because that really represents waste. Now, less waste means greater profits for a food business. And I think if people knew, if your customers knew, and actually if your workers knew that we're not wasting so much food, I think people are actually happier. Let me go back and tell a little bit about the history of reducing food waste. We started in Hong Kong in December 2012. The government started the Hong Kong Food Wise campaign. In 2013, actually grassroots organizations in mainland China started the Empty Plate campaign, and the government really quite liked it, so they adopted it in order to persuade people not to waste specifically at banquets. Now this year in China, the government has started a new Clean Plate 2.0 campaign. So perhaps it's a message that actually for us in the whole country, including in Hong Kong, we might want to invite big waster back to help us. Now, in order not to waste food, whether you're an individual, a food business or an investor in a food business, it does take some brains. What this means is you pay some attention to not wasting food. But if you want some help, Hong Kong has actually produced many manuals working with stakeholders all across different industries to reduce food waste. You can download these booklets and we can start right away. Now, it's hard to talk about anything in the world today without touching on COVID-19. What has happened during this period of time is we're eating more at home. We're buying more food to cook at home. We're also ordering online. We're taking out food a lot more often, and food businesses have had to think about how to transform restaurants into doing takeout meals. There's also a lot of waste, both in terms of food and packaging. We may not have the answers right now, but going forward, we do want to focus on this aspect of our food habits and also see how we can be less wasteful. Now, my idea is it possible to rethink and rebrand the whole eating culture in this region of the world? I want to share some ideas with you. Well, in Chinese culture, we always say eating in Guangdong. Why do we say that? Because Cantonese food is supposed to be amongst the very best. Over the years, Hong Kong has also become famous in Chinese culture about food. In Hong Kong, not only do we serve good Chinese food, we actually provide very high quality international food. But in reframing, rethinking, and rebranding food, my idea is, can we say that eating here, we can cook, we like to eat, we know how to eat, we eat well, we eat clean, we eat wise, and we eat health. That means eating healthily. But at the same time, we structure our food business, we don't waste, and we are low carbon. Can you imagine that if we can rebrand Hong Kong, that we could provide all of those things? Now, but you do need to get started. You do need a number of preconditions. So first of all, we need to improve our food safety laws. Secondly is, let's not eat endangered species. We can take them off our menus altogether. Also, there used to be a practice about cooking and eating with the seasons. And lastly, we already actually have a campaign in Hong Kong of reducing salt and sugar. Well, I'd like to think that eating here, we can offer great menus, great service, value for money, whether you're going to a very expensive restaurant or going to day-to-day eateries. People consider health, how we cook, what we put in the food, and of course, the whole menu, the whole way that we eat and think about food is environmentally sustainable. So dream with me a little bit. Is it possible for our region, that's Hong Kong, Macau, and Guangdong, to imagine that we'll have a 10-year campaign? Because it takes this long to rebrand and change everybody's image as well as our own habits. We do this over 10 years and we make sure we have the 4 T's as an operational model. We have targets, we have timeline, we have transparency, which means we make sure people understand the progress we're making, and as a region and as a community with stakeholders and the community together, we do it together. And let's ask 𝗏𝗏𝗃 to help us. Finally, I want to thank you for your time, and I'm sure if we're able to reduce food waste and eat wisely, we will be much happier. Thank you.